Hello, friends. I'm so excited to come your way this week with the finality of the word of wisdom on the subject pillars of wisdom. Last week, I touched on the foundation of knowledge, and I promised you that this week I will be bringing you the knowledge of God. But before I proceed on, permit me to make this bold statement. Any human being who does not know God is not yet living. And I'll repeat it again. Any human being who does not know God is not yet living. Why am I saying so? Because you can marry your choice of spouse, gather fortunes, wear the best of clothing, work in a high-end company, put on the best of all crowns, travel around the world, preach on the most prestigious stage, but does not know God. You have not entered into the better life of eminent hopes and premier and imperial purposes. To know God is eternal, because God is eternal and He dwells in eternity. So this is what John has to say in John chapter 17, the verse number 3b. And he says, "This is life eternal, to know God." That means you don't have to rejoice of your acquisition of wealth on earth, neither the places you've traveled to. But what is most important is where your soul and spirit will transient into when this earth you live in passes you by, or you go away into the next life of yours. No matter how well you live on earth, without the knowledge of God, you don't have eternal security. And this brings me to the crust of my message on the knowledge of God. But let me quickly share with you what knowledge is. Knowledge is equal to information plus analysis. And information without analysis is worthless. It can even lead you into confusion and self-destruction. Getting information is easy, but getting the appropriate information is not easy. It comes with analytical thinking. And that is why in this very time we live in, where social media has become so available for anyone to go on social media platform and express whatever they want to express, it is very crucial for you to analyze every information that you hear or you gather, because a lot of people get information, they consume the information, but they don't assimilate it. They don't really analytically consider the information. And that is why it is very important that whatever information, whatever knowledge you get, you will have to sit down and analyze it in a critical thinking. Knowledge always leads to understanding, and understanding also leads to wisdom. Knowledge comes from the Greek word gnosis, and the Hebrew counterpart of knowledge is yahav, meaning to know. And this phrase, to know, means having intimacy. So if you read Genesis chapter number 4, the verse of 1, Moses made us to understand that when Adam knew his wife and she got pregnant, the phrase knew his wife simply means when they had intimacy, they had consummation. Eve got pregnant. So you will understand that to gain knowledge and obtain knowledge, it means you have to have an intimacy with a certain kind of information. And that's where analysis comes in. There are many and different kinds of knowledge. There is experiential knowledge, academic knowledge, and revelational knowledge. All forms of knowledge are acquirable because it's based on facts and realities. But the knowledge of God is revelational, because God cannot be studied. He is invisible. He is eternal. He is the infinite of everything. So God can only be revealed, not obtained nor acquired. You cannot acquire the knowledge of God except it has been revealed to you. This knowledge I'm talking about is based on truth and not on fact. So the knowledge of God is based on truth and not on realities. So I'll say that apart from the revelational knowledge, which is the knowledge of God, all forms of knowledge are limited. For instance, if we want to consider academic knowledge, is confined to a specific discipline. For instance, I might have knowledge about literature and not chemistry. That means when you change the subject matter from literature into chemistry, you will see me very limited. And in the same way, you might have knowledge on physics and not on chemistry. And the minute the button switches, you will find yourself wanting, because why? You are limited. And that is why academic knowledge is limited. In the same way, when we consider experiential knowledge, is also limited to one's activities in life. A person's knowledge of experience in life is completely different from another. The fact that someone had a bad experience in marriage does not mean that another person is also going to have bad experience. It differs. Your knowledge on your previous job is different, or might be different totally from your present one. This is why this type of knowledge is also limited. It's only based on one's experience in life. But when we come to the revelational knowledge, which is the knowledge of God, is above all boundaries, because it comes from the source of truth. And the source of truth is God himself. Let's look at something quickly. In Colossians chapter number 2, the verse of 3, Apostle Paul said, in him lie hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So you can understand that the treasures of knowledge is hidden, and it can only be revealed to you or to someone through revelation of an intimacy with God. So watch it very carefully. One day Jesus took the whole disciples to Philippi, Caesarea, and he asked them, what do people say I am? And then they told Jesus about who the people say he is. And then he switched onto them and said, but who do you say I am? And Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That means you're the Messiah. And Jesus said, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So Peter caught up a revelation, not of something that was written in a book. The true knowledge of God lies at the foundation of the revelation of his mystery. Why? Because God is mystery. That is why he is invisible. You can't see him with your physical eye. Therefore, you cannot go to school to acquire or obtain the knowledge of him. You cannot know him by reasoning, nor intellectual attainment, but by revelation and the gifts of God. So God first revealed himself to creation as Elohim, but by intimacy he also revealed himself to Abraham as Almighty, and to Moses as I am that I am. So this knowledge of who God is to these individuals on different occasions and different times are revelation through their intimacy with God. When Moses went onto the mountain to meet God and take the 10 commandments to govern the people of Israel, it was not something that was written down for Moses to go and study. God revealed and he gave unto him. He scribed it and gave it unto him through revelation and by his intimacy with God. As I have already said, the knowledge of God is also a gift he gives to whom he chooses. For instance, if you read Exodus 31, when God instructed Moses to build the temple, he said, I have given Bezalel the knowledge of all manner of workmanship. That means the guy had the skill, the ability, the insight of all manner of workmanship. It had nothing to do with his academical background. It was purely a gift of knowledge from God to be knowledgeable for a particular purpose, for a particular divine assignment. And so was Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys in Babylon in the book of Daniel, that God gave them the spirit of wisdom and the spirit of knowledge to have visions and interpret dreams. It is very imperative for you to know the knowledge of God through revelation. Now, with all these things, you got to understand that the full knowledge of God is revealed and found only in one person, and that is in the person of Jesus Christ. The fullness of the knowledge of God is revealed through Jesus Christ. And that is why Apostle Paul said in Philippians chapter 3, the verse number 10, that I may know him and know the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, being made conformable unto his death. What was Apostle Paul saying? He has followed God all this while, but then he came back saying that I may know him. So all this while, Apostle Paul, who was very intellectual, he was a lawyer by profession, yet he said that I may know him. It is the intimacy that reveals the mystery of who he is. Now, let me explain what I mean. Because in the Old Testament, people knew God through their laws. So legal laws that were binding the people of Israel, they began to see the manifestation of the act of God, but they didn't know him. So they were seeing the things of God, not knowing God. So they were practicing things that they were not too familiar with. They were practicing things that seeming that it was God, but it was the things of God. So you can go to school, theological seminar, you can be religious, go to church on Sunday and Fridays and any day of the week, and yet you may not know God. Listen, the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Child of God, I want you to understand that to know God is to have an intimacy with him, and to have an intimacy with him is him bringing the revelation of how you will know him.